Story number 1. The Silent Conductor. Christmas in Canada has always held a certain magic for me. The twinkling lights, the crisp winter air, and the warmth of family gatherings. But the Christmas of 1963 aboard the Northern Star Express is a memory that haunts me to this day. A night when the festive spirit was overshadowed by an inexplicable darkness. I was a young teacher from Toronto, eager to escape the monotony of city life and visit my uncle in the remote town of Evergreen. The Northern Star Express, renowned for its scenic routes through the Canadian wilderness, promised a picturesque journey through snow-laden forests and frozen lakes. As I boarded the train on Christmas Eve, the anticipation of a peaceful holiday trip filled me with joy. The train was a marvel of its time, gleaming wood paneling, plush seats adorned with red and green fabrics, and large windows offering panoramic views of the winter landscape. Families, couples, and solitary travelers filled the carriages, their laughter and conversations creating a lively atmosphere. I settled into my compartment, grateful for the cozy space and the promise of a restful journey. As the train chugged away from Toronto, the rhythmic clatter of the wheels on the tracks became a comforting lullaby. We passed through quaint villages blanketed in snow, the glow of Christmas lights twinkling like stars against the darkened sky. Inside the dining car, passengers enjoyed hearty meals, clinking glasses of eggnog, and singing carols that echoed through the halls. Around midnight, the weather took a sudden turn. The skies darkened, and a fierce snowstorm engulfed the train, reducing visibility to mere feet. The conductor announced a temporary halt due to the blizzard, urging everyone to stay calm and remain in their compartments until the storm passed. The once vibrant atmosphere grew tense as the train was stranded in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by an impenetrable wall of snow. As hours turned into what felt like an eternity, anxiety began to mount among the passengers. The warmth of the compartments provided little solace against the howling winds outside. It was during this time that I first noticed him. A man in a black cloak, seated alone in the back of the dining car. At first glance, he seemed out of place, his attire starkly contrasting with the festive decor. The cloak was dark and heavy, the hood casting his face in shadow, obscuring his features. He sat quietly, a long cane resting against his seat, his presence both mysterious and unsettling. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something unnerving about him, something that set him apart from the other passengers. Curiosity got the better of me one restless evening, and I decided to approach him. As I made my way through the crowded dining car, the whispers of concerned passengers followed me, but I pressed on. When I reached his seat, he looked up, his eyes piercing through the darkness. "Excuse me," I began hesitantly. "Is everything all right?" He offered a faint smile, his demeanor calm and composed. "Just waiting for the storm to pass," he replied in a soft, measured tone. His voice was soothing, yet there was an underlying sadness that tugged at my heart. We exchanged a few words about the weather and the unexpected delay, but he remained an enigma, offering little more than polite conversation. As I returned to my compartment, I couldn't help but feel a lingering unease, a sense that there was more to him than met the eye. The hours dragged on, and the storm showed no signs of relenting. The train remained stuck, the passengers growing restless and fearful. That night, as the clock struck 1, I heard a faint, melancholic melody drifting through the corridors, a haunting rendition of Silent Night. The music seemed to emanate from the dining car, drawing me back to where the man in black still sat alone. Compelled by an inexplicable force, I returned to the dining car. The other passengers had retreated to their compartments, leaving the carriage eerily silent. The man was still there, his presence a ghostly beacon in the dimly lit room. He gazed out the window, his eyes distant and unfocused, lost in a realm far removed from our reality. As I approached him once more, the temperature seemed to drop, the air thick with an oppressive chill. "Why do you keep coming back here?" I asked softly, my voice barely above a whisper. He turned to face me, his expression one of profound sorrow. "This train," he began, his voice tinged with pain, "was my last journey. I never made it home that night." A shiver ran down my spine as the weight of his words sank in. "What happened?" He sighed deeply, the sound heavy with regret. "A tragedy befell us in the storm. Lives were lost, including mine. I wander these carriages each Christmas, searching for peace that eludes me." Before I could respond, the train began to tremble, the sound of screeching metal echoing through the dining car. The lights flickered ominously, casting long shadows that danced menacingly on the walls. Panic surged through me as I realized the train was attempting to move again, the storm outside showing a glimmer of relentlessness. "Stay with us," he pleaded, his eyes pleading for understanding. "Help us find our way." I wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, but fear held me back. As the train slowly began to move, the man in black remained seated, his figure growing more transparent with each passing second. The melody of Silent Night faded into the distance, replaced by the relentless pounding of the storm. As dawn broke, the train finally regained its momentum, pulling away from the immobile tracks and into the clearing sky. The storm began to abate, the first light of Christmas morning casting a hopeful glow over the landscape. The dining car returned to its lively state, passengers emerging from their compartments, unaware of the ghostly encounter that had transpired hours before. I left the train that morning with a heavy heart, the memory of the man in black and his sorrowful plight etched into my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had glimpsed something beyond the veil of the living, a reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring quest for peace. Years later, the legend of the phantom passenger aboard the Northern Star Express became a cherished Christmas tale in Evergreen. Passengers reported strange occurrences during their journeys, faint melodies, unexplained chills, and fleeting glimpses of a sorrowful figure in a black cloak. Some believed he was a restless spirit, forever bound to the train by the tragedy that stole his life. I returned to Evergreen many years later, now an old man with silver hair and a face weathered by time. The Northern Star Express still ran its Christmas Eve route, a symbol of hope and tradition for the town. As I boarded the train once more, the festive spirit filled the air, and the warmth of the compartment embraced me like an old friend. Sitting near the window, I gazed out at the snowy landscape, the memory of that fateful night lingering in the back of my mind. As the train chugged along, a familiar melody began to play, a soft rendition of Silent Night that seemed to echo through the corridors. I turned to see a figure seated in the dining car, a man in a black cloak, his eyes filled with the same sorrow and longing I had seen decades earlier. This time, however, there was a sense of peace in his presence, a subtle smile that hinted at resolution. As the train moved forward, he stood up, nodding a silent farewell before fading into the light, his spirit finally finding the closure it had sought for so long. The phantom passenger had found his peace, and the Northern Star Express continued to carry passengers through the winter night, a testament to the enduring power of remembrance and the hope that even the most restless spirits can find solace in the warmth of the holiday season. And so, every Christmas Eve, as the Northern Star Express embarks on its journey through the snowy Canadian wilderness, the legend of the silent conductor serves as a haunting yet heartwarming reminder of the fragility of life, the depth of sorrow, and the enduring quest for peace amidst the storm. Story number 2. The White Carriage. I never believed in ghosts. Growing up in the heart of London, surrounded by the relentless hustle and bustle of the city, I found comfort in the tangible and the explainable. But that Christmas of 1932 changed everything I thought I knew about the unseen world. It was a night aboard the White Star Limited, a Christmas train that had become infamous for the eerie occurrences that plagued its journeys each holiday season. What began as mere whispers among locals soon transformed into a haunting reality that would forever alter my perception of Christmas and the spirits that linger beyond our sight. I was a young journalist, eager to make a name for myself by uncovering the truth behind the supernatural tales that circulated in London. The White Star Limited was renowned not just for its luxurious accommodations and scenic routes, but also for the ghost stories that enveloped it like the winter fog. Passengers reported hearing strange noises in empty carriages, seeing apparitions of families long dead, and experiencing inexplicable chills that seemed to pierce the very soul. Skeptics dismissed these accounts as figments of imagination or the result of overactive minds in the festive season. But something deep inside me yearned to uncover the truth. My investigation led me to the archives of the railway company, where I pored over old records and passenger logs. The most consistent reports involved a particular carriage, known simply as Carriage 13, a designation that struck me as odd, given that trains typically avoided unlucky numbers. Legend had it that on Christmas Eve of 1930, a family had perished in a tragic accident aboard the train, their spirits forever bound to the White Star Limited. Since then, every Christmas, their apparitions returned, reliving their final moments in an endless loop of sorrow and loss. Determined to experience the phenomenon firsthand, I booked a first-class ticket on the White Star Limited for Christmas Eve 1932. The train departed from London King's Cross at precisely 6 p.m., its elegant carriages gleaming under the station lights. As I boarded, I couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The first-class lounge was a marvel of Victorian design, with plush seating, ornate woodwork, and large windows that framed the snowy landscape outside. Passengers mingled, their laughter and conversation creating a lively atmosphere that contrasted sharply with the sinister tales surrounding the train. I settled into my compartment, a spacious room with a comfortable bed, a writing desk, and a window seat that offered a perfect view of the passing countryside. The compartment was decorated festively, with garlands of holly and twinkling lights adorning the walls. As midnight approached, the train began to glide smoothly through the snowy landscape, the rhythmic clatter of the tracks providing a soothing backdrop to my thoughts. Around 11 p.m., as the clock in the corridor struck 11, I began to hear faint whispers echoing through the carriage. At first, I dismissed them as the wind or the murmurs of other passengers, but the sound grew louder and more distinct. It was as if someone was speaking directly to me, their words muffled yet urgent. I glanced around, but the compartment was nearly empty, save for a few tired passengers lost in their own reveries. Curiosity gnawed at me, and I decided to investigate. I exited my compartment and made my way down the aisle, the whispers growing louder with each step. The corridor was dimly lit, the overhead lights casting long shadows that danced eerily on the walls. I reached Carriage 13, the door slightly ajar, inviting yet foreboding. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The carriage was immaculate, untouched by time. Plush seats were arranged neatly, and the Christmas decorations sparkled under the soft glow of the chandelier. In the center of the carriage sat a family of 4, a mother, father, and 2 children engaged in a silent conversation. Their faces were pale and lifeless, their eyes vacant and haunting. The mother's hand rested gently on her daughter's shoulder, while the father gazed out the window, lost in thought. The children sat quietly, their expressions mirroring the sorrow of their parents. "Hello," I called out softly, my voice barely audible over the lingering whispers. The family turned their heads in unison, their eyes meeting mine with a profound sadness that sent chills down my spine. The mother smiled faintly, a gesture that seemed both welcoming and tragic. "Welcome," she whispered, her voice echoing through the carriage. "Join us for Christmas." I took a hesitant step forward, but the atmosphere grew heavy, the air thick with an oppressive sorrow. "What happened here?" I asked, my voice trembling. The father looked at me, his eyes filled with an eternal pain. "We were lost," he replied, his voice hollow. "Trapped in this loop of loss and despair. Every Christmas, we relive our final moments, hoping to find peace." I felt a surge of empathy and a deep sense of sadness for the tormented souls before me. "Is there a way to help you find peace?" I asked, determined to bring closure to their suffering. The mother reached out a hand, her touch cold and ethereal. "Remember us," she pleaded. "Honor our memory. Let us know that our story is heard, that our pain is acknowledged." As her hand passed through mine, I felt a wave of sorrow wash over me, the weight of their tragedy pressing down on my heart. The whispers intensified, the sounds of their anguish filling the carriage as if their pain could no longer be contained. The children began to cry softly, their tears shimmering in the candlelight like frozen gems. Desperate to help, I reached for my notebook, scribbling down their words and capturing their haunting presence. "I will remember," I promised, my voice barely above a whisper. "I will tell your story." The family nodded, their expressions softening as a sense of hope flickered in their eyes. The atmosphere began to change, the oppressive sorrow giving way to a fragile sense of peace. The whispers faded, replaced by a gentle silence that enveloped the carriage. "Thank you," the father whispered, his voice filled with gratitude. "May your words bring us the peace we seek." With those final words, the family began to fade, their forms dissolving into the ether as the carriage returned to its pristine state. I stood there, the remnants of their sorrow lingering in the air, a poignant reminder of the tragedy that had befallen them. I returned to my compartment, my mind reeling from the encounter. The rest of the journey passed in a contemplative silence. The memory of the white carriage etched deeply into my consciousness. As the train approached London at dawn, I felt a sense of fulfillment, knowing that I had witnessed something extraordinary and had the power to honor their memory. Upon arrival, I immediately set to work, crafting a detailed account of my experience aboard the White Star Limited. The story of the ghost train and the white carriage captivated readers, shedding light on the tragic history that had long been shrouded in mystery. The book became a bestseller, its haunting narrative resonating with those who had experienced loss and sorrow of their own. Years later, the legend of the white carriage continued to grow, the ghostly apparitions becoming a cherished part of London's Christmas folklore. Passengers on the White Star Limited reported similar sightings each Christmas Eve, a testament to the enduring legacy of that tragic night. The train became a symbol of remembrance and the unbreakable bonds that connect us to those we have lost. I often find myself revisiting the story, driven by a deep sense of responsibility to honor the spirits who had shared their sorrow with me. The white carriage remains a haunting reminder that some stories are destined to be told, their echoes forever entwined with the magic and mystery of Christmas. It serves as a testament to the power of memory and the enduring spirit of those who seek peace beyond the veil of death. And so, every Christmas, as the snow begins to fall and the lights twinkle across London, I am reminded of the white carriage and the souls that linger on the White Star Limited. Their story is a chilling yet beautiful reminder that even in our darkest moments, the bonds of love and remembrance can transcend time and space, offering a glimmer of hope amidst the shadows of the past. Story number 3. The Phantom Express. I've always been fascinated by trains, their rhythmic clatter, the promise of destinations unknown, and the stories they carried within their steel carriages. Growing up in Chicago, the hustle and bustle of the city gave way to the serene sounds of the railway tracks that wound through the urban sprawl. But nothing could have prepared me for the eerie mystery of the Phantom Express, a tale that would haunt me every Christmas thereafter. It was the winter of 1952 when the Chicago-New York Christmas Express vanished without a trace. The train was scheduled to depart on Christmas Eve, laden with passengers eager to reunite with their families and celebrate the holiday in the warmth of New York City. The journey was supposed to take 12 hours, a smooth ride across the snowy expanse of the Midwest. But a brutal snowstorm swept through the region that night, cutting off communication and visibility. When the train failed to arrive, panic ensued. Search parties scoured the tracks, but no sign of the train or its passengers was ever found. The disappearance baffled authorities and left the families of the missing in a state of perpetual grief and uncertainty. Years passed, and the story of the Phantom Express faded into local legend, a ghostly tale whispered around fireplaces and Christmas gatherings. But every December, The legend seemed to come alive anew, stirring up a mix of fear and fascination among those who dared to believe. I first encountered the mystery of the Phantom Express in 1985, over 3 decades after the train had vanished. By then, I was a freelance journalist with a penchant for uncovering the obscure and the unexplained. When I heard about the recurring sightings and strange occurrences every Christmas, I knew I had to investigate. The idea of a ghostly train, forever roaming the snowy tracks, was too compelling to ignore. I decided to visit the small town of Burlington, Illinois, situated along the old Chicago-New York railway line. The town had grown quiet since the train's disappearance, but every Christmas, the locals would gather to share stories and warn outsiders about the Phantom Express. According to them, the train would appear out of nowhere on Christmas Eve, its lights shining brightly through the darkness. Yet no one could see any passengers on board. The sound of its whistle would echo through the night, a haunting reminder of the tragedy that had befallen them. Armed with my camera, voice recorder, and a notebook, I arrived in Burlington a few days before Christmas. The town was decorated festively, with twinkling lights and wreaths adorning every door. But there was an undercurrent of unease that permeated the air. I checked into a local inn, where I met Eleanor, an elderly woman who had lived in Burlington her entire life. "Young man," she said, her eyes weary but kind, "if you're here to see the Phantom Express, you must be careful. It's not just a story, you know." I nodded, intrigued by her warning. "I've heard the tales, ma'am. I just want to understand what's happening." Eleanor sighed, motioning for me to sit. "The Phantom Express is a tragedy that still lingers in our hearts. Those who vanished that night never found peace, and their spirits are bound to the tracks. Every Christmas Eve, they relive their final journey, hoping to find their way home." I spent the next few days interviewing locals, piecing together the fragmented memories of those who had lost loved ones to the Phantom Express. The accounts were consistent: strange lights, the sound of a train, and the chilling realization that the train seemed empty despite its imposing presence. Some claimed to have seen shadowy figures inside, while others spoke of an overwhelming sense of sorrow that accompanied the apparitions. On Christmas Eve, I decided to stake out the old railway bridge where the train was last seen. The bridge was a relic of a bygone era, its iron beams weathered by time and the harsh Alaskan winters. I set up my equipment, hoping to capture evidence of the Phantom Express. As midnight approached, the wind picked up, carrying with it a flurry of snowflakes that danced in the pale moonlight. At exactly 12 o'clock, the sound of an approaching train began to fill the air, the rhythmic clatter of wheels on tracks, the distant whistle, all signs that the Phantom Express was making its spectral journey. I watched intently as the lights of the train materialized in the distance, growing brighter and more defined as it drew closer. My heart pounded with a mix of excitement and fear. The train glided over the bridge, its carriages gleaming under the moonlight. I could see the intricate designs of the vintage carriages, the elegant woodwork, and the warm glow emanating from the windows. But as it passed, something felt off. There were no passengers visible, no signs of life inside. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant sounds of the storm. Suddenly, the train began to slow, coming to a halt right on the bridge. The whistle blew mournfully, and the doors of the last carriage swung open, revealing a darkened interior. I strained to see inside, but the windows were pitch black, mirroring the darkness of the night. A cold chill swept over me as I realized the passengers were nowhere to be seen. As I stood there, trying to process what I was witnessing, a figure appeared in the doorway of the last carriage, a woman dressed in a flowing, vintage gown, her face pale and sorrowful. She smiled softly, a gesture that seemed both welcoming and heartbreaking. "Welcome aboard," she whispered, her voice echoing through the night. "Join us on our journey." Before I could respond, the woman vanished, and the train began to move once more, the lights fading into the distance as it disappeared into the storm. I was left alone on the bridge, the weight of what I had seen pressing down on me. My camera and recorder had captured nothing, leaving me with nothing but my memory and the haunting image of the ghostly woman. In the days that followed, I found myself obsessed with the Phantom Express. The lines between reality and the supernatural blurred as I delved deeper into the mystery, seeking answers that seemed just out of reach. I returned to Burlington the next year, determined to uncover the truth and perhaps bring some closure to the restless spirits that haunted the tracks. But the Phantom Express was elusive, slipping away like a shadow in the night whenever I tried to get closer. Each Christmas Eve, it would reappear, a reminder of the tragedy that had forever changed the lives of those who had lost everything in the storm. The townsfolk continued to share their stories, their voices tinged with sorrow and fear, as the legend of the Phantom Express grew stronger with each passing year. One particularly cold Christmas Eve, I decided to take a different approach. Instead of watching from a distance, I sought permission from Eleanor to stay inside the old railway station, hoping to capture more direct evidence of the Phantom Express. The station was abandoned, its grand architecture now weathered and silent, a relic of a time when trains were the lifelines of communities. As midnight approached, I sat in the station, the only sound the howling wind outside. The temperature dropped sharply, and the air grew heavy with anticipation. Suddenly, the sound of an approaching train filled the air, the familiar clatter of wheels on tracks reverberating through the empty halls. I held my breath, the fear and excitement intertwining as the Phantom Express appeared at the far end of the platform. This time, there was no delay. The train glided smoothly into the station, its lights illuminating the darkened carriages. I watched in awe as passengers boarded the train, their forms ghostly and translucent, their faces etched with sadness and longing. Among them was the woman in the vintage gown, her presence commanding and sorrowful as she made her way down the aisle. I mustered the courage to approach her, my heart pounding in my chest. "Excuse me," I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. "Can you tell me what happened?" She turned to face me, her eyes filled with a depth of sorrow that spoke of untold pain. "We are lost," she replied, her voice echoing through the station. "Our journey never ended, bound to the tracks by the storm that took us from our loved ones." Tears welled in my eyes as I realized the true tragedy of the Phantom Express. These were not mere apparitions, but souls trapped in an eternal loop, reliving their final moments every Christmas Eve in a futile attempt to find peace. I wanted to help them, to find a way to release them from their torment. But I knew it was beyond my understanding. As the train prepared to depart, she reached out to me, her hand passing through my own with a chilling coldness. "Remember us," she whispered, her voice fading as the train began to move. "Tell our story, so we are not forgotten." With that, the Phantom Express vanished into the storm, leaving me alone in the silent station, the weight of their plea heavy on my heart. I left Burlington that night with a renewed sense of purpose, determined to share the story of the Phantom Express and honor the memories of those who had been lost to the storm. Years have passed since that Christmas Eve, and the legend of the Phantom Express continues to captivate and terrify those who hear it. Each year, as the snow begins to fall and the nights grow long, the tale is retold, a ghostly reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring power of memory. I've written extensively about the Phantom Express, hoping to shed light on the tragedy and perhaps offer a semblance of peace to the restless spirits that haunt the tracks. But every now and then, as I drive past the old railway bridge on my way home, I swear I see the faint glow of the Phantom Express gliding through the darkness, its lights shining brightly against the stormy night. The sound of its whistle echoes in my ears, a haunting melody that tugs at my soul, reminding me that some stories never truly end. They simply wait to be remembered. And so, the Phantom Express remains a spectral presence on the Chicago-New York route, a ghostly reminder of the past that continues to linger in the present. The story is one of loss, longing, and the unending quest for peace amidst the cold, unforgiving winter. As long as the snow falls and the night grows dark, the Phantom Express will ride the tracks, forever bound to the memories of those who once boarded its ghostly carriages on a fateful Christmas Eve. Story number 4. The Ghostly Carriage. I never believed in ghosts. Growing up in Tokyo, amidst the bustling streets and neon lights, I found comfort in the tangible and the explainable. But that Christmas Eve in 1970 changed everything I thought I knew about the unseen world. It was a night that would haunt my dreams and linger in my memories. A night aboard the Midnight Sakura Express that blurred the lines between reality and the supernatural. I was a young journalist, eager to cover the festive spirit that enveloped Japan during the holidays. The Midnight Sakura Express was renowned for its luxurious accommodations and scenic routes through Japan's most picturesque landscapes. This Christmas, however, I was assigned to document the train's journey through the remote regions of Hokkaido, a route less traveled and shrouded in mystery. The train departed Tokyo Station at exactly 10 p.m., its sleek silver exterior gleaming under the station lights. Inside, the atmosphere was warm and inviting, with passengers enjoying the camaraderie of the holiday season. The dining car was filled with the aroma of roasted chestnuts and mulled wine, and the soft strains of Christmas carols played over the speakers, adding to the festive ambience. I settled into my compartment, a cozy room with a large window offering a view of the snow-covered countryside. My assignment was straightforward: capture the essence of Christmas aboard the Midnight Sakura Express, from the decorations to the interactions among passengers. Little did I know, the true story lay hidden in the shadows of that very journey. As the train sped through the night, the landscape outside transformed into a winter wonderland. The snowflakes danced in the moonlight, creating a serene and almost magical atmosphere. Passengers exchanged stories and laughter, children eagerly awaiting their gifts, and couples enjoying the romantic setting. It was a perfect night, or so I thought. Around midnight, as the train pierced deeper into the remote areas of Hokkaido, an unusual stillness settled over the carriages. The laughter and music faded, replaced by an eerie silence that seemed to envelop the entire train. I glanced out the window, noticing how the darkness of the forest seemed to swallow the light, creating an impenetrable veil of shadows. It was then that I heard it, a faint, haunting melody of silent night drifting through the corridor. The music was soft yet unmistakable, its melancholic tune echoing through the empty carriages. Curious and a bit unnerved, I decided to investigate, hoping to capture this anomaly for my report. I made my way down the dimly lit corridor, the sound of the carols growing louder with each step. The train was nearly empty at this hour, the remaining passengers either fast asleep or lost in their own thoughts. As I approached the source of the music, I noticed an empty carriage with its door slightly ajar, the soft glow of candlelight seeping through the gap. Drawing closer, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The carriage was decorated for Christmas, with garlands of holly and twinkling lights adorning the walls. A large Christmas tree stood proudly in the corner, its ornaments sparkling in the candlelight. The dining tables were set with elegant dishes, and the scent of fresh pine filled the air. But most unsettling of all was the presence of a lone woman seated at one of the tables. She was dressed in a vintage kimono, her hair styled in an elaborate updo, and her face pale and ethereal. Her eyes were fixed on something beyond me, and a soft, eerie laugh escaped her lips, sending shivers down my spine. She seemed oblivious to my presence, her laughter continuing in a hauntingly joyful melody that contrasted sharply with the stillness of the carriage. "Excuse me," I called out, my voice trembling slightly. "Is someone there?" She looked up, her eyes meeting mine for the first time. There was a sorrowful sadness in her gaze, an unspoken plea that made my heart ache. "Welcome to our Christmas celebration," she said softly, her voice carrying a haunting melody. "Join us in the joy and warmth of the season." I took a hesitant step forward, but before I could respond, the candlelight flickered violently, and the room plunged into darkness. The laughter ceased abruptly, replaced by a deafening silence that pressed in on me from all sides. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness to reveal the empty carriage once more. Breathing heavily, I backed away from the table, my mind racing to comprehend what had just happened. The door swung shut behind me with a force that rattled the entire train, and I was left alone in the dark corridor, the haunting presence of the ghostly woman lingering in my thoughts. The rest of the journey passed in a tense silence, the passengers uneasy and on edge. Some whispered about the strange occurrence, while others dismissed it as a figment of their imagination or a trick of the mind. But I knew what I had seen and heard was real, a supernatural presence that defied explanation. When the train finally arrived at St. Petersburg station in the early hours of Christmas morning, I was both relieved and disturbed. The passengers disembarked, their faces reflecting the lingering unease of the night's events. As I stepped off the train, I felt a cold breeze brush against my skin, a final reminder of the ghostly presence that had haunted our journey. Determined to uncover the truth behind the mysterious woman, I delved into the history of the Midnight Sakura Express and the region it traversed. What I discovered was a tragic tale from decades earlier during World War II. A young woman named Aiko Nakamura had boarded the same train on Christmas Eve with her family. The war had torn her country apart, and she had hoped that the journey would bring her family closer together in the midst of chaos. But tragedy struck when the train was caught in a fierce snowstorm, derailing deep within the remote wilderness of Hokkaido. Aiko and her family perished in the wreckage, their bodies never recovered. The incident was swiftly buried by the authorities, and the Midnight Sakura Express continued its operations, the memory of the lost passengers fading into obscurity. But it seemed that Aiko's spirit had remained, unable to move on from the tragedy that had claimed her life. Each Christmas Eve, her ghostly presence returned to the train, reliving the final moments of her life and seeking solace for her restless soul. Armed with this knowledge, I returned to the train the following year, determined to witness the phenomenon once more and perhaps bring peace to Aiko's spirit. The anticipation was both thrilling and terrifying as I boarded the Midnight Sakura Express, the familiar warmth of the dining car greeting me once again. As midnight approached, the atmosphere grew thick with an unspoken tension. The same haunting melody began to play, and once more, I found myself drawn to the empty carriage. This time, however, I was not alone. A small group of curious passengers had followed me, each of us eager to witness the supernatural occurrence firsthand. As the music played, the ghostly woman appeared once more, her presence both beautiful and sorrowful. We watched in silent awe as she smiled, her eyes filled with a longing that transcended time and space. For a moment, it felt as though the past and present had merged, the spirits of the lost passengers connecting with us in a shared moment of understanding and empathy. "Thank you for remembering us," she whispered, her voice a soft echo that resonated deep within our souls. "May our spirits find peace." With those final words, the candlelight flickered, and the carriage was once again plunged into darkness. The haunting presence lifted, replaced by a serene stillness that filled the train. We stood in silence, the weight of the encounter pressing down on us, knowing that we had borne witness to something extraordinary. In the years that followed, the Midnight Sakura Express became more than just a train ride. It became a symbol of remembrance and the enduring power of the human spirit. Passengers began to honor the memory of the lost souls by sharing their stories and ensuring that the tragedies of the past were never forgotten. The train continued its journey through the snowy landscapes of Japan, carrying with it the echoes of Christmases long past and the lingering presence of those who had perished in the pursuit of love and unity. Every Christmas Eve, as I board the Midnight Sakura Express, I carry with me a sense of reverence and gratitude for the spirits who had touched my life. The ghostly woman, Aiko Nakamura, remains a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring bonds that connect us across time and space. Her story serves as a testament to the power of memory and the importance of honoring those who have been lost, ensuring that their spirits find the peace they so desperately seek. And so, The legend of the ghostly carriage lives on. A haunting tale that blends the beauty of Christmas with the mysteries of the supernatural. It stands as a reminder that even in the most joyous of times, the shadows of the past can reach out, forever entwining our lives with the stories of those who came before us. Story number 5. The Ghost Train of Moscow. I never believed in ghosts. Growing up in the heart of Moscow, surrounded by the relentless pace of city life, I found comfort in logic and reason. But that Christmas of 1985 changed everything. It was supposed to be a simple journey from Moscow to St. Petersburg, a trip to reconnect with my estranged family after years of silence. Little did I know, the train ride would plunge me into a nightmare I couldn't escape. The night was bitterly cold, the kind of freezing that seeps into your bones and makes every breath a visible plume. The Moscow-St. Petersburg Express was bustling with passengers, their chatter and laughter creating a lively atmosphere despite the harsh weather outside. I had arrived at the bustling station early, eager to board the train and find my way to St. Petersburg. My ticket confirmed my reserved seat in carriage 12, window seat 5. As I settled into my compartment, the warmth of the heater was a welcome relief from the icy winds. The compartment was cozy, adorned with rich wooden paneling and plush seats that promised a comfortable journey. I unpacked my small suitcase, placing it neatly in the overhead compartment before stretching out and settling in for the night. The train departed on schedule, the rhythmic clatter of the tracks providing a soothing backdrop to my thoughts. I glanced out the window, watching the snow-covered landscape blur into streaks of white and gray. The city lights of Moscow faded into the distance, replaced by the stark beauty of the Alaskan wilderness, or so I thought. Our route had taken an unexpected detour through the remote northern regions, a fact I had dismissed as a necessary change due to the heavy snowfall. Hours passed uneventfully, the occasional whistle of the train and the soft murmur of conversations the only sounds that broke the silence. As midnight approached, the temperature inside the compartment began to drop sharply, the heater struggling to keep up with the biting cold outside. I pulled my jacket tighter around me, trying to stay warm. It was then that she boarded the train. I first noticed her when she approached our carriage, her presence almost ghostly in the dim light. She was a striking woman, tall and graceful, dressed in a vintage coat that seemed out of place in the modern era. Her hair was styled in soft waves, and her eyes held a haunting sadness that drew me in immediately. Without a word, she stepped onto the train and made her way down the aisle to an empty seat across from me. "Good evening," I greeted her politely, though she didn't respond. She gave a small, enigmatic smile before settling into her seat, her movements fluid and deliberate. I couldn't help but steal glances at her, intrigued by her mysterious demeanor. After a few minutes, I glanced at the passenger manifest on the back of my seat, expecting to see her name listed among the travelers. To my surprise, she wasn't there. "Excuse me," I called out, my curiosity getting the better of me. "Are you on the passenger list?" She looked up, her eyes meeting mine for the first time. "I believe I am," she replied softly, her voice melodic and calm. "I'm Anna Petrovna." I checked the manifest again, but her name was nowhere to be found. "I don't see your name here. Are you sure you're supposed to be on this train?" Anna's smile faded slightly, a shadow of sadness passing over her features. "Yes, I am. Perhaps there's been a mistake." Before I could inquire further, the compartment door opened, and a conductor stepped in, greeting Anna warmly. She thanked him and turned back to me, her expression unreadable. As quickly as she had arrived, she vanished from my seat, leaving me with more questions than answers. The rest of the journey passed in a tense silence. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that Anna wasn't just another passenger. Her absence from the manifest and the eerie calm that had settled over the train only deepened my unease. Around 3 a.m., the train hit a particularly treacherous stretch of track. The snowstorm outside intensified, the wind howling like a chorus of lost souls. The lights flickered ominously, and the train began to slow to a crawl. Passengers murmured anxiously, unsure of what was causing the delay. Suddenly, the lights went out completely, plunging the entire train into darkness. Panic rippled through the carriages as passengers fumbled for their flashlights and candles. The silence was broken by a blood-curdling scream that echoed through the train, sending chills down my spine. I heard footsteps approaching, heavy and deliberate, as if someone was pacing down the aisle. The sound of rattling metal and the howling wind outside created an atmosphere of utter dread. In the darkness, I thought I saw Anna standing at the end of the aisle, her figure barely visible through the shadows. "Anna!" I called out, my voice trembling with fear. There was no response, only the oppressive silence and the relentless storm outside. The train jolted violently, throwing me against the window. I struggled to regain my composure, my mind racing to make sense of the terrifying events unfolding around me. As quickly as it had begun, the chaos subsided. The lights flickered back on, revealing the empty aisle where Anna had stood. Panic turned to confusion as passengers looked around, unsure of what they had witnessed. The conductor reassured everyone that it was just a power surge caused by the storm. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something far more sinister was at play. The train finally resumed its journey, moving steadily through the storm. Exhausted and unnerved, I decided to try and find Anna, hoping to uncover the truth behind her mysterious presence. I made my way to the dining car, where I found her sitting alone, staring blankly out the window. "Anna," I approached cautiously. "Can we talk?" She turned to face me, her eyes filled with a profound sadness. "There's something you need to know," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. Before I could respond, the train began to shake violently again, the lights dimming as if a storm had descended within the carriage itself. The temperature dropped further, and an icy chill filled the air. Anna's expression twisted into one of fear and desperation. "They're coming for us," she cried, her voice breaking. "They won't let us go." Suddenly, shadows began to dance around the dining car, shapes forming and dissolving in the flickering light. The screams and footsteps returned, louder and more intense than before, as ghostly apparitions materialized within the carriage. Passengers screamed and fled in terror, their faces pale with fear as they confronted the spectral horrors surrounding them. Anna reached out to me, her hand trembling. "We need to run," she urged, her eyes pleading. "They're trapped here, bound to the train by their unfinished business." Before I could respond, a powerful gust of wind swept through the dining car, knocking us both to the ground. The apparitions closed in, their mournful wails filling the air with a sense of unbearable sorrow and anger. I felt a presence pressing down on me, the weight of their anguish almost suffocating. Desperate to escape, I grabbed Anna's hand and pulled her towards the door. We ran through the chaos, dodging ghostly figures that reached out to ensnare us with icy fingers. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil within the train, the wind howling louder as if in protest of our attempts to flee. We burst into the corridor, the darkness now filled with the flickering lights of the other carriages. The apparitions followed us relentlessly, their presence a constant reminder of the tragic past that bound them to the train. I knew we had to reach the front before the train became completely lost to the supernatural forces that now controlled it. As we sprinted towards the locomotive, the train seemed to stretch infinitely, the distance between us and the engine growing with each step. The spectral figures closed in, their faces contorted with pain and rage, their voices a cacophony of screams and pleas. Just as I felt our strength waning, we reached the engine compartment. The conductor was there, his face a mask of fear and confusion as he struggled to regain control of the train. Anna turned to me, her eyes filled with determination. "We need to stop the train," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around us. "Only then can they find peace." I nodded, pulling out the emergency brake handle and pulling with all my might. The train screeched to a halt, the sudden stop sending a jolt through our bodies. The apparitions let out a final, mournful wail before fading into the darkness, their presence lifting as the train stood silent once more. The storm outside began to abate, the wind dying down as if the supernatural forces had been quelled by our actions. The conductor looked at us, his face pale but grateful. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "You saved us." We stepped out of the engine compartment, the first light of dawn breaking through the clouds and illuminating the snow-covered landscape. The train was no longer a vessel of horror, but a peaceful journey once again. Anna smiled, a genuine expression of relief and gratitude. "I can finally move on," she said softly, her form beginning to shimmer and fade. "Thank you for helping us find peace." As she disappeared, I felt a sense of closure wash over me, the weight of the spirit's anguish lifting from the train. The journey to St. Petersburg resumed without incident, the rest of the trip filled with a newfound sense of calm and gratitude. When we finally arrived at St. Petersburg, the sun was shining brightly, a stark contrast to the stormy night we had endured. As I stepped off the train, I looked back at the locomotive, a lingering sense of peace settling over me. The legend of the ghost train had been dispelled, but the memory of that Christmas night remained etched in my mind, a haunting reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead. Years have passed since that fateful Christmas of 1985, but the story of the midnight whistle continues to circulate among railway enthusiasts and locals alike. Some dismiss it as a ghost story, a product of the harsh Alaskan winter and the isolation of the train route. But I know the truth, for I was there, experiencing the horror and the salvation firsthand. Every Christmas, as the snow begins to fall and the Northern Express prepares for its annual run, I find myself drawn to the train station, listening for the faint echoes of the midnight whistle. The memory of Anna Petrovna and the restless spirits of the past serves as a poignant reminder that some souls never truly find peace until their stories are heard and their tragedies acknowledged. And so, the legend of the ghost train of Moscow lives on, a chilling tale of loss, redemption, and the enduring power of remembrance. It stands as a testament to the unseen forces that dwell within the shadows of our world, forever intertwined with the lives of those who dare to journey through the darkness. Story number 6. Whispers on the Highland Rails. Winter in Scotland is a time of stark beauty and biting cold, where the highlands transform into a snow-covered wonderland, and the nights stretch long and dark. It was Christmas Eve of 1960 when my life took a turn into the realm of the supernatural. Aboard the Highland Express, a train renowned for its scenic routes and festive charm, little did I know that journey would haunt me for decades to come. I'm Andrew MacLeod, a writer from Edinburgh, seeking solitude and inspiration for my next novel. The Highland Express promised the perfect escape: cozy cabins, roaring fireplaces, and the enchanting landscapes of the Scottish countryside. My wife, Margaret, and I had decided to embark on this Christmas adventure, hoping to rekindle our spirits amidst the tranquil beauty of the Highlands. We boarded the train at Glasgow Central Station, warmly greeted by the conductor, a jovial man named Fergus. The interior of the train was a blend of classic elegance and modern comfort, with rich wooden panels, plush seating, and large windows offering breathtaking views of the snow-draped scenery. The aroma of mulled wine and roasted chestnuts filled the air, adding to the festive atmosphere. As the train departed, we settled into our compartment, a spacious room with a large window that framed the passing winter landscape. The first few hours were idyllic, filled with laughter, shared stories, and the soft melodies of Christmas carols playing over the speakers. Children's laughter echoed through the corridors, and the warmth of the fire created a sense of camaraderie among the passengers. But as night deepened and the train ventured further into the Highlands, an unsettling stillness began to descend. The laughter and music faded, replaced by an eerie silence that seemed to envelop the entire train. Margaret and I exchanged uneasy glances, sensing that something was amiss. Around midnight, the lights in our compartment flickered, casting long shadows across the room. Fergus appeared at the door, his jovial demeanor replaced by a somber expression. "Ladies, we're approaching a less traveled section of the route. Please stay in your compartments and keep your windows closed." We nodded, feeling a chill that wasn't entirely due to the cold outside. The train continued on, the rhythmic clatter of the tracks now sounding more like a haunting melody. Suddenly, a faint, eerie laughter echoed through the corridor, a sound that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Margaret grabbed my hand, her grip tight with fear. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her eyes wide with terror. I nodded, trying to rationalize the sound. Probably just some children playing a prank. This train attracts a lot of holiday families. But as the laughter persisted, growing louder and more distorted, doubt began to creep into my mind. We heard it again, closer this time, a sinister chuckle that sent shivers down our spines. I decided to investigate, the need for answers overriding my apprehension. I stepped out of our compartment, Margaret following closely behind. The corridor was dimly lit, the overhead lights flickering intermittently. The laughter seemed to be coming from an abandoned carriage at the far end of the train, its door slightly ajar. I approached cautiously, the floorboards creaking under my weight. "Fergus," I called out, but the conductor was nowhere to be seen. The laughter stopped abruptly, replaced by a cold, whispering wind that seemed to emanate from the darkened carriage. Summoning my courage, I pushed open the door and peered inside. The carriage was empty, save for a single figure standing near the window, a woman dressed in a vintage, elegant gown, her face pale and haunting. Her eyes met mine, filled with sorrow and an unspoken plea. Before I could react, she vanished, the carriage door slamming shut behind me with a thunderous bang. Heart pounding, I stumbled back into the corridor, Margaret gasping beside me. "Andrew, what was that?" "I don't know," I replied, trying to steady my breathing. "But something's not right." We hurried back to our compartment, the oppressive atmosphere lingering like a thick fog. The rest of the journey was fraught with inexplicable occurrences, whispers in the night, doors opening and closing on their own, and the pervasive feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. The once cozy train now felt like a vessel of malevolent spirits, each carriage holding its own dark secrets. As dawn approached, the train began to slow, signaling our arrival at Inverness Station. Exhausted and shaken, Margaret and I packed our belongings, eager to leave the haunted train behind. But as we prepared to disembark, the lights in the corridor flickered one last time, and the woman in the gown reappeared, her form ethereal and glowing in the early morning light. "Find me," she whispered, her voice echoing through the silent train. "Don't let me remain forgotten." Before I could respond, she vanished once more, leaving us with a lingering sense of sorrow and a haunting reminder of the night's horrors. We hurried off the train, the cheerful festivities of the station contrasting sharply with the darkness we had left behind. Back in Edinburgh, the memory of that Christmas journey remained vivid, a ghostly imprint on my soul. Determined to uncover the truth, I delved into the history of the Highland Express and the abandoned carriage. What I discovered was a tragic tale from decades earlier, a woman named Eliza Fraser, a passenger who had perished under mysterious circumstances on a Christmas Eve much like ours. Her spirit, bound to the train, sought recognition and closure for her untimely death. Driven by a mix of fear and compassion, I decided to write a book about Eliza's story, hoping to give her the voice she never had and to bring peace to her restless spirit. The more I researched, the more I felt her presence, guiding my pen and whispering her sorrowful tale. The book became a bestseller, its haunting narrative capturing the hearts and imaginations of readers across the country. But the legacy of that Christmas journey didn't end there. Each year, on Christmas Eve, the whispers and laughter seemed to echo through the corridors of the Highland Express, as if Eliza's spirit continues to roam the abandoned carriage, forever seeking the acknowledgement and remembrance she so desperately craves. I often wonder if her spirit found peace through my words, or if she remains trapped in the spectral confines of the train, eternally longing for closure. The story of the haunted Christmas train serves as a chilling reminder that some souls are bound by the tragedies of the past, their echoes lingering in the present, forever entwined with the darkness that once consumed them. And so, every Christmas, as I listen to the ticking of my grandfather clock and watch the snow fall softly outside, I think of Eliza Fraser and the midnight whistle that forever changed my life. The Highlands hold their secrets tightly, and the spirits of those lost in the winter storms continue to whisper their tales, waiting for someone to listen and remember their stories amidst the silent, snowy expanse. Story number 7. The Midnight Whistle. Winter in North America is unforgiving, especially in the early 20th century when steam trains were the lifelines connecting remote communities. I grew up in a small town in Vermont, where the snow blanketed everything in sight, turning the landscape into a silent, white expanse. My father worked as a conductor on the Northern Express, a train that made its annual Christmas Eve run from Boston to Montreal. It was a tradition that brought joy and a sense of unity to our isolated town each holiday season. My name is Samuel Turner, and this is the story of the Christmas train that changed my life forever. It was Christmas Eve, 1922, and the air was crisp with the scent of pine and the promise of a fresh snowfall. The Northern Express was bustling with passengers, their excitement palpable as they prepared for the long journey ahead. Families bundled in warm coats, children with rosy cheeks, and the occasional lone traveler seeking solace in the rhythmic clatter of the train tracks. I was 16, eagerly anticipating my first official duty as an assistant conductor. My father, Thomas Turner, had been a respected figure in our town, known for his dedication and unwavering commitment to his job. I admired him deeply and hoped to follow in his footsteps, ensuring that every passenger reached their destination safely. As the train departed the station, the engine roared to life, a comforting sound that signaled the beginning of our journey. My father was in the locomotive, his eyes fixed on the tracks ahead, a steadfast presence that reassured everyone aboard. I took my place in the cabin, my heart swelling with pride and excitement. The first leg of the journey was uneventful, the landscape passing by in a blur of snow-covered fields and dense forests. We stopped at a few stations, picking up more passengers and exchanging warm greetings. It was a typical Christmas Eve run, filled with the magic and wonder that only this time of year could bring. As night fell, the train snaked its way through the wilderness, the darkness outside mirroring the quiet serenity within. The passengers settled into their seats, children drifting off to sleep with dreams of holiday cheer, and adults enjoying the peaceful solitude of the journey. My father and I shared a moment of camaraderie, discussing the final stretch of the route and the upcoming celebrations in Montreal. Around midnight, as the clock struck 12, a sudden, violent snowstorm erupted outside. The wind howled like a chorus of lost souls, and the visibility plummeted to near zero. My father's hands tightened on the controls, his face etched with determination and concern. "Hold steady, Samuel," he instructed, his voice calm despite the chaos outside. "We've faced worse. Just keep an eye on the signals." I nodded, my eyes scanning the track ahead through the small window. The storm was relentless, each gust threatening to derail us from our path. The train clattered over the rails, the wheels straining against the icy tracks, but my father maneuvered with skill, guiding us through the tempest. Suddenly, a blinding flash of lightning illuminated the sky, followed by a deafening clap of thunder. In that split second of light, I saw him, another train, its engine blazing with an otherworldly glow, hurtling towards us on the same track. Panic surged through me as I realized the impending collision. "Father, there's another train," I shouted, my voice breaking. He looked up, his eyes widening as he saw the phantom locomotive bearing down on us. "Hold on tight," he commanded, his tone unwavering. "We can't stop now." The two trains collided with a force that shook the very foundations of the earth. The impact was catastrophic. The sound of metal screeching and glass shattering echoing through the storm. The Northern Express was torn apart in an instant, the darkness swallowing us whole. When I awoke, I was disoriented and bleeding, my head throbbing with pain. The cabin was a wreckage of twisted metal and broken glass. The remnants of our once proud train now a tangled mess of debris. My father was nowhere to be seen, and a sense of profound loss washed over me. As I struggled to my feet, I heard it, the faint sound of a whistle, a mournful echo that seemed to come from the very depths of the storm. I followed the sound, my steps heavy against the frozen ground, until I reached the shattered remains of the locomotive. There, amidst the wreckage, stood my father, or at least, what remained of him. His body was contorted, his face frozen in a look of eternal sorrow and anguish. His eyes met mine, and in that moment, I knew he was no longer among the living. A chill ran down my spine as I turned to leave, but the sound of the whistle grew louder, more insistent. The storm seemed to intensify, the snow swirling around me in a blinding frenzy. Shadows danced at the edge of my vision, and I felt an overwhelming presence watching me, a silent witness to the tragedy that had unfolded. As I stumbled back to the cabin, the memories of that night flooded my mind. The laughter and joy, the warmth of the fire, and the love I had for my father. Now, all that remained was the haunting silence of loss and the spectral echoes of our final moments together. The next morning, the storm had subsided, leaving behind a blanket of pristine snow that covered the devastation. Rescue teams arrived, searching for survivors and pieces of the shattered train. They found me, weak and broken, but miraculously alive. My father, however, was gone, leaving me to grapple with the weight of his absence and the memories of our last ride. Years have passed since that fateful Christmas Eve, but the memories remain vivid, etched into my soul like the tracks that once guided us. The story of the ghostly train, the midnight whistle, became a legend in our town, a tale of love, loss, and the lingering spirits that roam the snowy wilderness each Christmas. Every year, as Christmas approaches, I find myself drawn to the old tracks where the accident occurred. The snow-covered rails glisten under the winter sun, and the wind carries whispers of the past. Sometimes, I swear I hear the faint sound of a whistle, a mournful call that sends shivers down my spine. One Christmas Eve, years after the tragedy, I decided to visit the site one last time, armed with my father's old pocket watch, a gift he had given me on my last Christmas. I made my way to the heart of the storm that had claimed his life. As I stood amidst the remnants of the wreckage, the wind began to pick up, swirling the snow into a blinding vortex. The air grew colder, the temperature dropping rapidly as if the storm itself sought to reclaim what was lost. I held the pocket watch tightly, its ticking a steady rhythm that contrasted with the chaos around me. Suddenly, the air shimmered, and the ghostly image of my father appeared before me, his form translucent yet unmistakably him. His eyes, filled with sorrow, met mine as he raised a hand in a silent greeting. "Samuel," he whispered, his voice echoing through the storm. "I'm sorry." Tears welled in my eyes as I reached out, my fingers brushing against his ethereal form. "I'm sorry too, Father. I miss you every day." He smiled, a bittersweet expression that conveyed both love and pain. "Remember us, Samuel. Honor our memories. Don't let the darkness consume you." With those final words, he faded into the storm, leaving me alone once more amidst the silence of the snow-covered wilderness. The storm began to calm, the wind dying down as if in response to my promise. I left the site that night with a sense of closure, the weight of the past lifted by the presence of my father's spirit. The midnight whistle no longer felt like a haunting memory, but a reminder of the bond we shared and the love that transcended even death itself. Each Christmas, as I hold my father's pocket watch and listen to its steady ticking, I am reminded of that night and the lessons learned from the tragedy. The ghostly whispers of the Northern Express serve as a reminder to cherish every moment, to honor those we've lost, and to find peace amidst the storms that life inevitably brings. And so, the legend of the midnight whistle lives on, a tale of love and loss that echoes through the snowy wilderness each Christmas Eve, forever entwined with the spirits that roam the tracks and the hearts that remember.